Why is it that 50 years on, more of our people are looking to come to the United Kingdom? It is indeed a sorry sight when young Africans now are feeling compelled to come over to the United Kingdom. It is more than an honor for me to speak today at the 19th anniversary celebration of the African Voice publication. I say that with all sincerity because it is a pleasure. The title of my presentation is The Need for the African Voice to be Heard in Britain. By the end of my presentation, you understand precisely why I say so. I came to the United Kingdom as a young boy of 7 years old. This was in 1969. I never imagined that 50 years on, I would still be here. That was never the plan of my parents. It was never the plan that I had for myself. We all expected to have gone back home. And I know as a fact that this was the plan of so many of us who came over in the Windrush generation. Instead of us going back, what we actually have is more of our people making plans by any means possible to join us over here. On the one hand, it calls for happiness, celebration, because it makes us less homesick. On the other, it is a sign that the dream of returning home is becoming less and less achievable. It has become imperative for the communities to understand each other. Race relations, it presents us with a challenge like never before. It is not a challenge that we can play ostrich to, whereby we can bury our heads in the sand and hope that it will go away. It is something that both sides have to confront and have to face up to. The only way we're going to be able to face up to it effectively is if we have communication. Communication with a view to understanding. But let me be clear as to what I mean when I say that it's important for Britain to hear the voice of Africa and Africans. I don't mean those Africans who simply have physical features consistent with an African identity, but whose sole desire is to ingratiate themselves with the British society and British establishment. Those are not the Africans that we're speaking of. They have no problems being heard. They're the ones who the establishment are always willing to listen to. No, by the African, I mean the African who is an African at heart and who wears his or her heart on their sleeves, who is proud of their connection with our homeland, and who has a genuine desire to make it better, not just in the abstract, but with a view to returning home or their children returning home. Now, central to the point that I'm going to make is this, is the answer to the question, why is it that 50 years on, I am still here? And 50 years on, more of our people are looking to come to the United Kingdom. Is the kind of question that the typical member of the Conservative Party might bowl at us. If you don't like it here, why don't you go back to your own place? Well, here's the answer in its simple form. The answer is that the quality of life and the standard of living in Britain is going up and up and up. Whereas, at the same time, the quality of life and the standard of living of the individual, the average person back home in our homeland, is going down and down and down. That is the simple explanation. But the key is the conjunction, the connection between the one that's going up and the one that's going down. the Conservative Party won the Brexit poll on a promise to end freedom of movement for Labour. They still want freedom of movement of goods and services. There's a kind of skewed and distorted version of globalization. So they want the goods and services to be free to move, but they do not want the freedom of movement of labour that should accompany the freedom of movement of goods and services in a true globalization arrangement. Brexit was a promise to take back control of their borders. And I'm aware that they are introducing later on this year a new bill titled the Fair Borders Bill, which, according to the Home Office Minister Priti Patel, will enable them to choose those who will be let in on the basis of the skills that they have to offer, as opposed to where they come in from. Now, on the face of things, that sounds fair enough, but when you get to the end of my presentation, you then appreciate that there's a problem with that proposal. You see, we the Africans, we observed how the borders of Britain were thrown open to mass migration from Europe, even from countries that were on the other side of the war in the First World War and the Second World War against Britain. In contrast, we the Africans who were dragged into that war, both in person and our resources on the British side, we struggled to secure opportunities in the United Kingdom. Frontline jobs in hotels, in restaurants that were previously close to our people, and we thought that they did not exist. Even though our people speak English as a first language, those jobs suddenly became available and filled by those coming in from the European Union. Many of them who struggled to speak English. It wasn't a problem. It simply the color of the skin that allowed them to take those front-end, front-facing jobs. As a historian, I observe with some irony the scenes of young Africans trying by all means possible to cross the Mediterranean, risking everything, many of them dying in the process, to try and get to the United Kingdom, or at least to Europe. It's ironic because when you think about how many of their forebears were forcibly taken out of our homeland over a period of 400 years in the course of the transatlantic slave trade, it is indeed a sorry sight when young Africans now are feeling compelled to come over to the United Kingdom. Now, that reference to the slave trade is important in the context of the solutions that we, the Africans, want to propose to the Minister in the Home Office in terms of addressing this immigration problem. It's because, I mean, the connection with the slave trade is uppermost in my mind at the moment, because I've just spent this lockdown writing a new book on the slave trade and its abolition. And one of the key lessons that came out of that was, you see, in the beginning, when they now changed their minds, not their hearts, in terms of the slave trade, to abolish it, the initial efforts, which involved the catching of the individuals who had been captured with a view to then taking them to Sierra Leone as part of the liberation process, reminds me very much of the current immigration policy, whereas the focus is to catch the individuals one by one. They realized that that policy was not working. during the abolition phase, and they switched. They changed over to tackling the problem at its source. In the words of, I think his name was Thomas Fowle Buxton, who was the lead thinker in the abolition strategies. He said, instead of trying to catch the bees after they may have left the nest, why not catch them and stop them from leaving the nest in the first instance? Now, I hope the connection between that policy and what I'm going to propose as far as the immigration challenge is clear. That instead of immigration policies which are expensive and which are not working, instead of focusing on trying to catch individuals who have been forced out of our homeland, why not change the policy in order to arrest the reasons and to deal with the reasons why they feel that they're having to leave in the first instance? The solution is simple. I'm not proposing that the Home Office or Ms. Priti Patel go and meet the leaders, the African leaders of the present, to go and offer them any form of cash inducements, to persuade them to adopt policies that arrest the migration of our young people out of the country. The solution is a lot easier than that. It's a solution that will not cost the British taxpayer a single penny. What is that solution? It is simple. It's simply a change in the partners with which the British and the British government are doing business back home, both at the political level and at the economic and financial level. Let me illustrate my point with a case that Ms. Priti Patel will be most familiar with. I'm speaking of the arbitration award in the P&ID case, in which the princely sum of $6 billion US, I repeat, $6 billion US, was awarded against our country in favor of what I can only describe as a briefcase company, a company that had no substance whatsoever. Together with interest, which is normally awarded at a compound rate, that award has now climbed to the massive figure of over $10 billion US. Now, Ms. Priti Patel, in November, 19th of November 2018, sought to publicly humiliate Nigeria into paying the 9 billion, as it then was, 9 billion award to this briefcase company. She said, we should all welcome international efforts to attract international investment into developing economies. However, to do this successfully, Nigeria must seriously tackle corruption rather than use it as a smokescreen. It must honor its obligations to companies like P&ID. Until then, investors inevitably will be very wary of investing in Nigeria. Now, you'll all be aware of the recent judgments of the High Court in England in respect of that very same award that Ms. Priti Patel was pressurizing Nigeria to pay up on, where it emerged from the evidence that the transaction in question, which was a gas transaction, was laced with fraud from beginning to end. And that it emerged that the only investment, outlay, I should say, that the briefcase company P&ID had actually made with a view to recovering this princely award of $6 billion US, bar the bribes that it had paid in order to get into that position, was zilch. They had not actually invested or outlaid any of their own money. The land that had been allocated to them for the project had not been paid for, either by them or by their proxies. and the other investments or outlay that they were supposed to make, they simply had not done so. I wish the PNID case stood in isolation, but that is not the case. As a commercial arbitration lawyer, I am aware of the way that the arbitration system is used and operated to fleece our people in Africa. I recently argued a case on behalf of the asset management company of Nigeria, in which we were robbed, daylight robbery, by the twisting of the laws, robbed of the princely sum of $6 million US. And to add insult to injury, of course, as is the rule, the loser pays. It is this systematic bleeding of Africa through all manner of devices, but principally through the support that is provided to incompetent leaders back home in Africa, that the country is drained of the resources that could make it possible for those of us who wanted to go home and to arrest the migration of our young people over here. And I should make it clear that I've been speaking in terms of Africa and Africans. By that, of course, I mean also the Africans in the Caribbean, our people there suffering from the same maladies as a result of the twisted relationship that we've been experiencing since the Windrush came over. The Fair Borders Bill sounds fair enough in giving priority on the basis of skills offerings rather than where people come from. But think about this. So long as we persist, or this practice persists, of fraudsters in government and fraudsters doing business with fraudsters in government, like the PNID case, where we're bleeding on all fronts, the resources that would have been available to uplift the skill sets of our people.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Sorry to interrupt you, sir. You have 2 more minutes.
I wish you hadn't, because I was just winding up.
Oh, okay. Sorry, sir.
Those resources are being stripped away. So on the face of it, Lady Justice blindfolded, awarding immigration rights, regardless of where they come from, only on the basis of the skills that they offer, works on paper. But so long as we continue to be ripped off in terms of the assets that will lift the skill sets of our people, then clearly it works unfairly. I close by reminding our audience that 20 years ago at the Millennium Summit, Mr. Blair, Tony Blair, spoke grandiloquently of a new partnership for African development. For the sake of the George Floyds, it is time for Britain to change its partners and to partner with the Africans who are Africans in their hearts and not just Africans in their appearance. The Africans who wear their hearts on their sleeves for their people.
Good afternoon. No.
This is the Royal Dalton I had in my house. This is yours.
Thank you very much for that, sir. I think I need some people to mute themselves. Thank you so much for that. I did have a question. I think he deserves a very big applause for that speech. Thank you very much for that. Excuse me, sir. Can you see any of the questions?
Yes. Well, no, I can't see any of the questions in the Q&A.
No, nor can I. Can someone who can see the questions read them out, please? Because I can't view the questions. So sorry, sir. I know there is a question.
Would you like me to read them out, Susie?
Yes, please. Thank you, Princess. I recognize your voice.
Thank you so much, Lawyer Ogun, for that. That was wonderful. Somebody's saying here, why should we blame others for our government's mismanagement and governance that is making our people to migrate out of Nigeria? That's one question.
The short answer to that was what I said, that they've been partnering with those who they know are not competent for governance. That is the reason. So you must look for the root cause and not the surface cause. Yes, the surface level, it is those in office, but they know that they're better available because those in office, they wouldn't even employ them in their own systems and in their own establishments, but they promote those ones in order to take charge of our affairs and bleed us dry on both fronts.
Thank you so much for that, sir. Sorry, Prince, do we have another question there?
Yes, there's a, well, this one, I think they probably want Lawyer Ogun to corroborate. It says, Nigeria has won the appeal on that 9 billion award. There wasn't a question mark after that, so I don't know whether it's a statement or a question.
It hasn't won the award, won the appeal yet. What happened was that the process by which you challenge an unfair outcome in arbitration is that you file what's called a challenge.
Without women, they are wonderful, and the motivator.
We need to mute. Can admin please mute?
I'm hearing all sorts of sound coming.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that. Admin, please mute everyone apart from Mr. Ogun, please.
Yes. So the process of appealing, challenging an award is under what is called Section 68 of the Arbitration Act. Our less than competent government failed to file that challenge within the time limit. And so technically it was out of time. So what this appeal was concerned about, this last hearing, was simply to allow us, for the court to exercise its discretion, to allow us to file the challenge and to proceed with the challenge late. So that's where we are.
Thank you so much for that, sir. Princess, I think we can take one more question.
Okay,
I'm going to ask you to read that one again, please.
Okay, the one I've just popped up now, it says, would you agree that Brexit would be fair, would be actually fairer since Africans can now have an access to the UK based on skill set than the color of their skin? And the person said, this question is to Mr. Dele Ogun.
Well, again, the answer is, I addressed that in my presentation. On the surface, it looks fair. You get access on the basis of your skills. But if our people back home are being de-skilled by virtue of the corrupt dealings that I've mentioned, then as compared with other countries that have more robust and competent governance, you can see that it does not work in our interest.